I've just come out of the brand new Scream film, and this is my non-spoiler review. My name is Ben, this is Action Industries, and let's talk Scream. Do you like scary movies? It is a question asked in every single Scream film and continues to be asked in this one. Now, this movie is part of the requel trope, and it is part of what this movie is centered around, is actually poking fun at the idea that when you take pieces, legacy members of the original cast of a franchise, mix those cast members with new ideas and a new narrative, and try to spin off this thing into a future story, it is called a requel. We've seen a lot of these, right? The Force Awakens is like that, Ghostbusters Afterlife is like that. It's kind of almost like the template nowadays for the way that studios like to reboot franchises. This movie is all over that idea. I mean, it literally makes fun of it all throughout the entire movie. It even defines the requel concept. It goes through and lists it all out. It talks about the horror movies that are good. It talks about the horror movies and the ideas for sequels that didn't work. I mean, this movie is so on the nose and on the money. It's kind of hilarious, actually. And I think it's some of the great strengths that this film offers are those things. A lot of time has passed since the original Scream, and I think this movie, to me, feels the most like a Scream film should feel. It's the one that feels the closest in energy to the original film. Hard to beat the original film, really. You know, it's a tall order, but they do a really great job with this one. So I'm going to get into kind of the things that work, the things that didn't work, and then the things that I think were just like, what were they thinking? And there really aren't too many in this movie, which is a good thing. So I just rewatched all the Scream films. Andrew and I saw this together. We screened it at the theater, and we had just watched all of them together. I also watched Scary Movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm about to watch New Nightmare because I'm getting ready to record the new episode of our show, The Best and the Worst, which is the show where we take an actor, a director, a franchise. We use scientific data to establish the best and the worst movie in whatever that franchise or, filmography or whatever is. We're doing Scream next week, so we wanted to make sure we had seen all the Scream movies recently and also kind of all of that source supporting material to make sure we could reference it. And the thing I'll say is that I think the Scream sequels, by and large, 2 through 4, have major problems. I'll talk about my exact ranking of those, I think, probably on the episode, and I can define my exact rankings of those a little bit clearer. But nothing's really touching Scream 1. I mean, that's just, even if this film, the requel version of Scream, was the best movie I had ever seen, it still is just a retelling of some elements of the original movie. It's really hard to beat that, right? It's a very difficult thing to do. It's kind of why the requel formula ultimately is set up to be second best at best. That's kind of what it's made for. Because it's taking so many elements of the original movie that it's very hard for the new movie to really feel like it stands on its own without all of these ideas that have come from the original. So I think a lot of people love The Force Awakens, and a lot of people believe The Force Awakens is the 4th best Star Wars movie, right? There's the trilogy, then there's The Force Awakens. I think that's kind of what you have to go for when you go with this formula. So let's talk about the things that worked. Number 1, the kills. The kills in this movie are fantastic. Best kills in a Scream movie, period. It hits the nail on the head completely. It is gory. They are gruesome. They are inventive. They're modern. It really takes all of the juice that was missing, I think, in Scream 3 and Scream 4 with the kills. Well, really, Scream 3 was the one that was missing. 4 has some pretty good kills, but this takes, I think, kind of all of the juice that you want to have in a slasher film, in a violent slasher film, and really delivers. There was multiple times that Drew and I both were looking at each other. It's like, oh my God, that is just savage. Definitely some cheers from the audience when it came to that. I thought that was one of the strongest elements of the movie, for sure. The self-awareness is really strong in this movie. They do a great job with it. It continues to be some of the best stuff in the franchise. I think because it's been so long, and Scream 4 does a good job. I actually think Scream 4 is pretty solid. It does a good job, and enough time had passed since Scream 3 that they could build on it and make new references, but I do really feel like enough time had passed since the original. They could go back to a lot of the ideas from the first one, and they could also make reference to some of the sequels, some of those direct sequels that hadn't worked, and they can kind of poke fun at themselves. The Stab franchise continues to be a big part of the Scream storytelling. The sort of legacy of Scream exists within the Stab franchise, and the Stab franchise is such an important part of it, and so they continue to reference Stab movies to poke fun at the Scream franchise. All of that self-awareness, I think, was really, really strong. I personally really liked some of the new actors. I actually think that Melissa Barrera did a really good job. I knew her from In the Heights this year, was the first thing I had seen her in. The other actress that I really liked was Jenna Ortega, and they're sisters in this film, and they do a really great job. I think they're kind of the emotional core of a lot of what this movie's about. Now, you throw in some new cast members. Obviously, you have some cast members that need to be expendable. It's a Scream movie, and as you've seen on the poster, we bring back the 3 essential key pieces of the original Scream legacy. You've got Neve Campbell, you've got Courtney Cox, and you've got David Arquette. So, let's talk about the stuff that didn't work for me. Number one thing that didn't work for me was Courtney Cox, David Arquette, the Dewey-Gale relationship. Now, it kind of occurred to me that I actually think the weakest part of the franchise in general is the Dewey-Gale relationship. I kind of have a big problem with it. It's just not something I like very much. There's one scene in particular in this movie that I just think completely falls flat, sucks all the air out of the movie, does not work for me whatsoever. But when I watched Scream 2, I also thought that their energy was terrible. Scream 1, it's sort of campy, and it almost, like in Scary Movie, when they have Officer Doofus and they're making fun of Dewey, it feels so spot on because he's such a bizarre character. And there is something kind of lovable about David Arquette. I think on his own in this movie, I actually kind of like him. But the two of them together in every Scream movie for me is just a fail. To me, it's the biggest fail the franchise on the whole offers is that relationship. I know maybe I'll get skewered here. Some people really like that relationship. Just for me, it's not the thing, doesn't fly, doesn't work. I actually would go even a step further and say that the other thing that doesn't work about this movie is I think the original cast brings the energy down. I noticed because you don't get to start seeing the original cast until a chunk of the movie has passed. You set some stuff up, movie happens, and they bring in some of those original cast members, and when you start to get to see them interact, there's definitely some audience kind of, you're cheering a little bit because you're seeing your classic characters, and that's exciting. But at the same time, I don't think it actually adds as much to the film as they'd like it to. And maybe this is actually kind of par for the course with the movies that I'm talking about. Because, let's face it, Harrison Ford in Force Awakens, he's a little tired. I think Luke, you can say the same thing for. I think a lot of the older actors that you're bringing back for a small part or for a significant part in that requel format, they don't feel as exciting or fresh or springy as the new actors, as they shouldn't, right? They've been doing this for a long time. And so I think that that's probably the biggest area that it falls flat a little bit for me. And then there's the stuff that what the hell were they thinking? And in this movie in general, I don't actually think there's a whole lot of it. I don't really think that there's a whole lot. I think probably the number one biggest thing, why did they call this movie Scream? I mean, they poke fun at this. They make fun of this idea in the movie, but why are they calling it Scream instead of Scream 5? We have a movie called Scream. It's a classic. It's irreplaceable. Now, I know it's a new director. It's a new set of directors. You have Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett who made this movie. They're behind Ready or Not. And they do a wonderful job. I mean, they really get the energy and they really get the sort of persona of a Scream film, what it's supposed to feel like while you're watching it. All the twists and turns, the new rules that are established, all that stuff works for me. But I do think that calling it Scream is kind of a bizarre choice. I don't really know why they do that. And ultimately, I wish they had just called it Scream 5. I know people didn't want to think of it as a Scream 5, but it has Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette, so why are we not just calling it Scream 5? I think probably the place that this movie... I don't even know if this is something that what were they thinking, because I don't think that they could have fixed this. But when you think about the old Scream films and you watch this movie, the thing that you notice the most, this is what I was thinking about, is killing off Randy in the earlier film, Jamie Kennedy, and killing off Matthew Lillard in the first movie. Both of those things are misses. They're major misses that I think when you go forward in the franchise, you're missing those characters in the subsequent films. And I would have loved to have one of those characters in this movie. I think it would have been a lot of fun to have one of those characters, but they are long dead. They died in much earlier films. And so, anyway, I think those kind of wrap up the majority of my thoughts about the new Scream film. I recommend you guys see it. See it in the theater if you can. It was a lot of fun to watch. I was really happy they were able to do a good enough job to get my excitement up for Scream, and I would call this movie definitely a success. There's some laughs, there's some shielding your face from the blood splattering off the screen onto you, some just absolute savage, beastly stuff in the third act that is awesome, and then some really, really wonderful homages and sort of throwbacks to old characters, old moments, old scenes. They do a really good job with all that stuff. So overall, thumbs up on this one, guys. I recommend it. I really liked it. Be sure sure to check back, as I mentioned, for our brand new podcast, The Best and the Worst, that'll be dropping next week. We actually just put up the brand new episode on audio, and the video version of The Best and the Worst of Paul Thomas Anderson is going to be dropping here on the channel in the next 24 hours. So if you haven't already followed, be sure to follow. It's a great time to get involved with Action Industries. My name is Ben. Thanks for watching this. I really appreciate it. Be sure to hit the like on the video and leave a comment below. Do you like the Scream sequels? Am I way off base on this? Right? Like, do one of those sequels before this one, 2, 3, or 4, kind of compare to the first movie? Or do you think they're all trash? I would love to know your opinion, your thoughts. Leave them below. Otherwise, thanks for watching another review here on Action Industries. Enjoy Scream. I'll see you on the next one.